Welcome to Evolved Radio, where we explore the evolution of business and technology. So if you're in technology or business, you've probably heard the term big data. What does big data even mean anyway? Today I'm joined by Alastair Woolcock to talk about data science. We uncover the science of data analytics and how data is unlocking market-changing insights at all levels of business. This is the real guts, the real underbelly of what big data is actually leveraged for in business. Even if you're a small business trying to understand social media's impact on your marketing efforts, or you're a large enterprise organization trying to understand client behavior, data can be an incredibly powerful tool. And today, Alastair and I talk about the growing industry of data science and how businesses are digging through this mountain of data to find relevant insights that could give them an advantage in the market. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast from. Also, be sure to check out the webpage, evolvedmgmt.com/podcast for show notes, links to my guests, and to check out previous episodes. Now, let's get started. Joining me on the podcast today, I have Alastair Woolcock, and Alastair is a principal consultant at Credera, as well as a founder and business partner at Cabu Global. Thanks for coming on, Alastair.
Thanks so much, Todd. Appreciate joining you today.
So Alastair and I have a long history, known each other and worked in the past. Definitely one of the smarter characters I've worked with. Amazing sales executive, amazing executive business executive as well. And Alastair, you and I have had a shared passion for data and analytics throughout the years. And I first recognized sort of your insight in this when you were building a data analytics and trading platform under Trafalgar. Do you want to give us a little sense of kind of your technical history and your business history and what's led you to where you are currently in your career?
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. What you referenced there on the trading platform, today doesn't seem as revolutionary, but when we first stepped into that was in 2008. And our basis thesis was this: could we build a black box that could do intraday trading on the live markets of NYSE and S&P and everything else in a single click technology? And we did. We went about, we endeavored, and we built that black box and traded live for the next 4 years using those programs. And it was an algorithmic trading model that we built out, an incredible piece of technology that proved both rewarding and technically challenging as those things do. We underestimated some data sets and did well on others. We moved several $1 million worth of capital over those 4 years on the Trafalgar model. Outside of that, then we endeavored and took that largely into the general data space. And that was with the parlay into what is Credera, the firm that I'm at now. And we've used that very successfully to drive our initiatives with companies like Starbucks and Brinker and other firms like that, where we've really taken a digital strategy and tied in their back-end data delivery and e-commerce platforms and really customer information, and now extrapolated that into revenue-producing models. And we're quite excited about where that can go. And then on the Cabu side, we bring in the data science capability, which is a super hot component in the market that I think everybody's beginning to wrap their heads around as we continue to hear what are effectively right now industry buzzwords.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we definitely wanted to touch on is the term big data gets thrown around a ton. And even as we were chatting before we started recording, big data doesn't really mean anything. It's such an overused marketing term that unfortunately the capabilities and what that future technology will offer often get lost in the noise of that. You suggested you like the term data science better. Can you explain to us why that makes a better terminology for what you're trying to do in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. Because to me, big data, it's just a different segment that supports the greater construct of data science. And what I mean by that is most people that big data strategies are really leveraging BI analyst work, a lot of reporting, dashboarding, optimization type things. They're doing data warehouses, all of which are essential underpinnings to a data science strategy for a company. However, what just putting in a data lake or a data warehouse and doing reporting and dashboarding, it can give you information, but it doesn't correlate necessarily to a business outcome. And that is why I think when you think of where big data is going, you could break it into 6 primary categories of customer insights, the product components, some efficiency, digital marketing, operational excellence, or your products and services that you can bring to market. And when you think of bringing things to market, you don't typically think of data warehouses. So iterating from just the conversation of having a big data strategy to a data science strategy is an essential pivot for companies as they think of how to create revenue, retain customers, or bring new things to market. And I think there's some phenomenal examples of that of recent history and even back into the 1990s.
So you hit on something that I talk a lot about when I'm working with clients. I'm a huge fan of dashboarding and data analytics in general and what insights that can give you to the business. But what I often warn people against is that those dashboards and those reports, they won't give you any answers. They can often give you great questions to continue to ask, but people often think that they're going to be able to have some magical insight or that the data is going to point blank tell them something that they didn't know. And quite often that isn't the case. It's more of I have a theory, I want to test some data, do some review and some analysis. Now what does the data tell me? And therefore, what should I continue to ask? Does that sound similar to your approach?
It does. Simply stated for me, Todd, the IT works around, pivots around how to optimize or present data back to, say, an executive team or marketing teams or anybody else to make a decision. Whereas data science is more akin to a scientific process, right? You want to start with a hypothesis and you want to prove that right or wrong. Just like we did at Trafalgar back in the day, our hypothesis was, could we build a system that would do intraday trading in a single-click technology? Because we knew that was monetizable and we knew that would be a powerful tool set for the market. So it's really thinking outside the box, and it is coming out with your hypotheses and then proving those right or wrong, and knowing that a wrong proof point is as powerful as proving something correctly in some cases. I actually really think this is, I would say this is IT's Moneyball moment, to use the famous Oakland A's analogy that got turned into the movie, right, with Brad Pitt. Here you have fundamentally the ability to now to go take new information sources and collect them and acquire them and combine them with external sources and solve business issues in completely radically new ways that haven't been thought of before. And I think it's that radicalization of it that is so key.
So obviously some metrics and analytic points that people would be traditionally familiar with are revenue targets or customer acquisition, use numbers, number of key customers in region, those types of kind of very blank or what I would call boring numbers. What are some of the numbers that you feel maybe scratched deeper on the surface, things that you're starting to piece together and potentially some use cases and how that deeper information is being leveraged for insights in both small to medium business, but well as enterprise?
Yeah, I think good question. I think, well, let's just look at a couple of use cases, right? And they don't even need to be modern use cases to show you how prolific this can be. In the 1990s, there was a company that achieved incredible success by untapping the hyperlinks in encoded web pages. And many of us use that company today, and that was Google back in the 90s. Or you take another little startup from back then, which became one of the most prominent, lucrative data science projects in history. And the rumor of this firm was that it had 15 to 20% of the retail businesses due to a simple product recommendation engine. And that company is Amazon. Or you take UPS and their on-road integrated optimization navigation initiative called Orion, and they revamped their entire route optimization software all through connecting data sources that were previously unconnected. And now they've dynamic routing schedules that save millions and millions of dollars per year and help with the customer service. Those are things from the 1990s. And I think it's important context because everybody hears these buzzwords and thinks, oh, well, who's really using this yet? Well, the people who are using this now are some of the biggest companies in the world because they got ahead of the curve. And I think what the difference is back then it was fundamentally revolutionary. Today, it's a requirement for survival in the enterprise and arguably mid-market component. So you can't shy away from this anymore. You have to figure out how to connect both the structured and unstructured data sets that you have within your four walls, within your data centers. And then how are you using external data sources to help with that? And we can go through, if you like, I think there's some just excellent use categories that are broken into those components of insights, process efficiency, digital products, operations, marketing, and so forth.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. Like, let's just sort of imagine, and maybe this exposes a bit of your process as well and how you would approach this. But do you need a customer that has a particular problem or a question at hand? Or if not, then what would you kind of approach them with on data discovery and potential points of interest to start to collect some of this info?
I think every customer should be having hypothesis-based conversations around how they could use data broken into one of those subcategories I just mentioned. So whether it be insights into their customer database or some form of process efficiency, bringing new digital products or services to market, or operational excellence, or some form of marketing. Those are just great macro categories to then ideate around. And the CMO, as combined with the CIOs, should be ideating on those things. And we can kind of pick into those a little bit, take customer insights as an example. Look at how Toyota applies machine learning. They go ahead and they are using multiple data sets on their customers in terms of the interactions for their real-time social media monitoring. And they're, as a result of that, personalizing the customer experience. So when you walk in and are buying the next Toyota Tundra, it isn't just Todd randomly walking off the street. Once they know who you are, they're correlating with your interactions to the website. They're watching and monitoring then your social media activity and beginning to pivot their marketing strategy around making your experience a better experience with them. And that's phenomenal. And this information is so readily available. So I would say to somebody, think of customer insights. It's not revolutionary. Do you have access to all your customer information from your stores, from your web, from your phone, from your catalogs? What are you doing with that information data set? On the web logs, every single customer click online yields a piece of intelligence to you. What are you doing with that data source? The account information is very insightful. The information that is shared by the third parties, including the creditor assessors and all of those things, that's massively important. Wearable devices these days, right? Do you have an app strategy that ties to a wearable device so you can start to pull in that information from your target consumers? Fitbits, the Apple Watches of the world, right? You don't need to invent the technology. You just need to layer your component into that and then consume the data coming back out. And then just third-party purchased information. I think there's a fantastic amount of that from a customer's insight standpoint. And Toyota, as that example, is doing that. And that's an easy thing that I think we will go, okay, well, maybe some of that crosses the line in terms of how far we want to draw insights from it. But when done artfully, done creatively, and done to improve your experience, most consumers readily share that information. And it can be a strong differentiator in buying difference as to why you buy a Toyota Tundra versus a Ford F-150.
I find this really fascinating that the different data points often act as noise. And I think you used a term that I think kind of helps to drill down a little further in artfully approaching it, because I think that marriage of the data science plus sort of the art and the finesse around knowing exactly what data within that lake is actually going to be relevant and will gain you some insights. That to me feels like the expertise that is required for these types of engagements. We know what has worked, we know where to look, and therefore we can extrapolate that data and give some meaningful information about it versus just, we have these 14 terabytes of customer data, but we're not exactly sure what it tells us. That to me is the distinction between the big data just being that pool of information and data science being able to actually carve it up and understand it in a meaningful way.
I think you're absolutely right, Todd. And you think from just a traditional big data strategy, and most companies have some form of strategy around that now, it's giving great affordability to store and process large volumes of unstructured, semi-structured, and structured data, and potentially even together, depending on how that's set up. But you have to remember the data is no longer static, and it arrives, it changes, and it can remain immutable. It can be written once and never changed, for example, in data microservices. So how do you deal with the volume of potential change or the volume of data of what you're doing? And then how do you ask questions around that? And certainly when we built the trading platforms, more data isn't always make you smarter, right? It's the questions and finding and sourcing the answers around that. So starting with, again, strong hypothesis, prove it through, start with reasonable sized data sets, understand, are you using your internal corporate big structured data? That will give you one series of answers. Unstructured could give you another series of answers. So then you need to be able to combine those two. And often you need some form of custom algorithm to do that, write your algorithm. And then from there, you can begin to prove out the insights between all of those variable changing data sets. And that may be static against, say, a bunch of customer data. It may be live interaction based upon business process efficiency that you're trying to drive.
Now, we've hit on a bunch of places where data can be incredibly helpful. In your travels, have you ever come across any areas where data is not helpful or causes more confusion than it is worth? Any areas that you tend to avoid, maybe?
I think I suppose philosophically, I don't think there are too many places where it can't be used. I think it's such a greenfield opportunity. I do, however, and this is based off a little bit of personal experience from last year, that I think there's the propensity for data to be used without people having knowledge of its use, and that has the potential to be scary. And I'll pick on a hot topic that is unfortunately in the nightly news cycle every single time right now. I've firsthand knowledge from the US elections last year and how we leverage data by both political parties to create better sentiment analysis and voter analysis and voter opinions and shifting of those opinions. And I'm okay with that from the standpoint of, this is what every party does. It's a competitive thing that they're going through in terms of acquiring voters. But when people aren't aware of the information bias that is being created by technology, and they don't know how to understand that's a questionable abuse of power or information to an extent. And here's the reality of what happened in last year's election cycle. Both parties, so we can't blame one or the other, have very advanced data science strategies and teams in-house. For those who don't know, it's one of the biggest expense items that they now contract out through multiple third parties in the US election cycle. And you're not trying to just shore up your base. Sure, you want the basics of knowing where Todd lives and the party and your political likes and dislikes, but you're really looking for that 3 to 4% of voters that will swing an election. It's not the people that are diehard one way or another in terms of party affiliation. It's the swing voters in the middle that will win or lose you an election. And we went about and helped strategize on some of this work, as did several other firms, in terms of applying basic premises of psychology and then creating scenarios using social online tool sets and profiles and techniques to create agreeable content with a constituent base, and then stressing that constituent with some content that they wouldn't necessarily agree with, and then doing that over successive periods 3, 5, 6 months. And over time, you can change the sentiment of that voter to not completely agree with you, but on something that might have seemed completely off base and provocative to them 6 months ago. You have now created enough online digital interaction with them and social interaction with them that you've actually subtly shifted their bias on information over time, and you've changed their click-through content, which is the underlying algorithms from all the search engines as well. So you're pushing content that is more like the party that you want to achieve the outcome for. And you can actually change a voter base's very perception of candidates through these methods. Now, again, is that good or bad? That's not for me to decide. I think it's a fascinating use case of how data is worked and used, but it is very suggestive of markets that people are ignorant of what we're doing. And is that right or wrong? I think it's for the public to decide.
Yeah, I think what you just detailed there, if I could maybe put my spin and summary on it, would be that that's the technical detail of what people would often refer to as fake news. And not that it's necessarily fake, but it's that psychological influence of how someone is actually perceiving something, when what their general exposure of information is. And if you can tweak that, it's similar to, how people would be maybe changing the flavor profile of foods to make them more appealing. You're making an idea appeal in some ways, right?
That's exactly right. And that's the thing that is, that's the thing that scares people. But at the same token, this is also where the exciting thing in this world of big data and data science is headed as well, because while it can be manipulated in the example we just gave, you can, by the same example, take volumes of structured and unstructured and internal and external data and create more insight than you've ever been able to create before as well. And that can have some very profound impacts for, I think, technology and treatments and many places, right, all around. You only need to look at General Electrics and what they're doing on the predict side, right? They're now designing specifically to industrial and data analytics. The Ford has created the OpenXC, an open platform to unlock vehicle data and innovation. Well, that's going to be key as we move towards autonomous vehicles. You're going to want that universal access to these platforms that people can contribute to make car transportation safer, to make it more economically viable, to bring underdeveloped countries into this technological spectrum. And that's all going to happen through these use cases of unstructured and structured data coming together.
So you hit on a future topic that I think is going to be super fascinating, that how that data is actually utilized potentially in an AI situation where there's software that's doing interpretation of that data, and the use cases that you touch on there with the Ford data pool being open is sort of the more expanded version of what Tesla currently does in their autopilot program, where the telemetry data from all of those independent cars are making the whole system smarter. And this is also a big use case as well in data security. The antivirus engines and data security platforms are using the heuristics of the encounters that the individual endpoints have, and understanding what's going on the internet in a broad field, so that if it detects it a second time in a different machine, it's able to actually shut down those processes. And this advent of the background telemetry and how software could potentially leverage that information, I think, is going to be incredibly powerful in a lot of ways that we actually don't understand yet.
I think you're absolutely right. That's it's an uncharted territory, and it's uncharted because people are wondering how to monetize this, right? If you're the average traditional company, you know that you have prolific growth in your data sets, but it again back to how do I go about using this and actually making it applicable to me, right? How do I grow profits and revenue? How do I better connect with customers? How am I creating some form of competitive advantage? And that starts with, again, those hypotheses, right? Then you want to drill into deeper into the shape of the data using more advanced techniques. This might be, cluster or factor analysis, anomaly detection, regression models, decision trees, Monte Carlo simulations, link analysis, all of those types of things come to bear. And those aren't skill sets that you would normally find in just somebody that is a BI analyst. And that kind of ties us back to what you were saying earlier. A data scientist is going to have somebody that knows how to build analytical modeling, but they themselves then also need a statistician with them. So how are companies going about finding those that are those PhD level mathematicians, and maybe not even PhD level, but they competent at the mathematical modeling, but have the gifts of programming as well. So when you talk about building neural networks, you can combine the data scientist with the statistician, with the BI analyst, and bring the trifecta of those skill sets together. That's where you need the CIO to understand the skill set, but you need the CMO or CEO really to understand, hey, what is it that you want to try to test in the market? What is that Moneyball moment that you think you want to try to go prove?
So one of the things that I think this exposes is that, what does the future of work look like? And I think you're right. There's going to be a lot more data science positions as high-paid roles because there's, again, going to be this absolute sea of data that people need to weed through and understand and correlate against things. And that could be, a great future career opportunity for people that are just coming out of grade school education and looking towards university. And, what do I do? Data science sounds fun. And you could be, discovering some new things and working on some pretty amazing projects, and those data insights that you would potentially put together in a project could be a ton of fun.
Absolutely. And I would encourage anybody is don't chase technology for technology's sake or data for data's sake. Chase an outcome or a hypothesis that you're passionate about. And one of the use cases I love so much is, when it's the one about Kaggle back in 2015, I think it was, right? And for those who aren't familiar with the Kaggle and what they built, they invented devices that could provide early detection for diseases. And the big one that they came out with was they can create early indicators now for diabetics. And that whole competition and what they brought to bear resulted in us now having tool sets and a piece of technology that was a result of data scientists designing and modeling automated detection systems for diseases. So if you've got a passion for healthcare, you can apply data science very easily to that and challenge yourself with, how can I take that to solve that problem? Early detection, predictive detection is there. Genome therapies and all of these things are becoming more monetizable, but also they are becoming more prolific in just general care and well-being of people. And I think chase that passion and you'll do well, because the data is coming. The data and the access to the data is not the issue anymore. It's having people to understand how to put that together with statistical skills, programming skills, and then modeling and analytic skills.
Yeah, because a lot of what we're seeing here is that the use of data and analytics is not necessarily new, as you pointed out. This dates back to handwritten spreadsheets, probably in the early 1900s, and that was the complexity of data analytics. And then the pure data analytics that we're talking about in sort of this deep source stuff was usually limited more to enterprise environments, because the sheer volume, the complexity of the software to run this stuff, and then the storage space in order to keep this around for any relevant period of time was probably limited a lot more to the enterprise. But certainly more and more with SaaS-based solutions in particular, your ability to have data analytics around every part of your business, regardless of what you do. You're a two-man shop. You probably have marketing analytics. If you're not using Google Analytics, it'd be shocking. And if you're not collecting some customer information, again, like these are missed opportunities. So what I see is we're kind of borrowing again from what's been done in the enterprise and applying it more to a small business market, which obviously creates a much, much wider opportunity for everyone in the market to capitalize on.
Absolutely. And on top of that, there is just so many, as a small business owner, or even a medium business, sits there and goes, well, we don't have really enough insight or data. We're not going to go invest in multi-million dollar tools. I don't even think you should anymore. To your point, there's a great open source ecosystem, and there's many platforms with this already integrated, whether it be Microsoft's or Google's. It's all available. But there's a plethora of third-party open source data communities to go get everything that you need, right? Whether it be DataKind, whether it be some of the teachers' resources at archives.gov/education, whether you go to the Bureau of Statistics, which is bls.gov, or you go to even the census bureaus in both Canada and the United States, right? Census.gov, and look at their income visualizations. Like there's so many ways you can find more out about your customer, about who is in the market, about who the competitors are, about the services you want to bring to market, the problems you want to solve. You can understand what's trending in healthcare and where to go that. And all of that data is publicly available. It's never been that accessible before. You had to do, it was very binary before, it was catalog based or very Excel spreadsheet driven. And the average firm or company couldn't go get it. But now if you have a vision for a problem, you can go source third-party data and stress it against your own models and come up with better hypotheses. So you're not locked anymore to just yourself. You can go well beyond that.
Well, Alastair, it's a fascinating field. I think we'll potentially have you back to talk a little more as the field develops, maybe check in 6 months to a year. Any words of wisdom or asks from the community that you would like to put out there?
No, I would just challenge people to keep throwing use cases out there. If you have problems that you want solved, let us know. I think there's such a community building that people just want to try to solve better global problems using data. Don't shy away from challenging firms like the ones that I work with to solve these problems. We are prepared to create those point of views. We're prepared to stress these models, and let's continue to contribute to the open source data networks that are out there. As we all collectively contribute, we are solving phenomenal problems in disease, in transportation, in logistics, and we should all be very empowered to be part of that in our daily being and daily habits.
I appreciate your time, obviously, and look forward to seeing more of the work that you're developing with both groups that you're doing work with. If people want to connect with you on LinkedIn or Twitter or on social, where should they look for you?
Just look for me on LinkedIn at Alastair Woolcock at LinkedIn. It's all one word. Or you can always hit me up on Twitter at Alastair KW, and happy to connect with everybody there as well.
Excellent. Thanks for your time, Alastair, and all the best.
Thanks, Todd.